Okay, so we are going to look at the two pieces of Korean art that we are going to take a look at from this period of East and South Asian art. So here we have the golden jade crown. This was made, we are looking at the Three Kingdoms period, particularly from the Silla Kingdom in Korea. It's called the Three Kingdoms period because there were indeed three kingdoms that were in control and ruling different parts of the Korean peninsula. You had the Silla Kingdom in the southeast, the Baekje Kingdom in the southwest, and the Goryeo in the north. Eventually the Silla Kingdom comes to dominate the other two. So this is the Three Kingdoms period. All right. So this crown, as you can see, is made out of, it would have been made out of a sheet of gold that was cut into these shapes, right? And so there's lots of gold spangles hanging off it. So this would be gold wire attaching these spangles. And we also see these sort of, I don't know, you could say they're cashew or comma-shaped pieces of jade. This is white and green jade. This is a different kind of jade than the jade that you would see in China. So, looks similar, but not the same mineral as, or gem, I guess semi-precious stone that you'd see in something like the jade Kong, although it is still commonly referred to as jade. So, in terms of function, this was found in a large mound, burial mound, tomb mound. And initially it was believed that this would never have been worn in life because it is so delicate, and that it was exclusively made to be in a burial mound, not unlike the funeral banner of Lady Di, right? So having that same kind of tradition that we saw in China of burying, elites with beautiful worldly possessions that they might take with them to the afterlife. But as it turns out, new research suggests there may have been some times where this might have been worn in life and then later buried with the person who it was made for. So those conditions would be, in terms of religion, by the 5th or 6th century, Buddhism had come to Korea from China. But before Buddhism came to Korea, they practiced a form of shamanism. So we have this sort of syncretic religion existing at the time, sort of a mix of Buddhism and shamanism. And a crown like this may have been part of shamanistic ritual. So it may have been used in life in rituals. Now, in terms of what does it mean, you notice that the form of it has these kind of prong-like qualities. So there's been some speculation, and other crowns that have been found from this time period and region also have a similar look. So it seems like there's something about this that means something, that it's this form. Could be antlers, some have suggested. Could be trees, tree branches. There was a tree in Gyeonju, sorry, my Korean's not good, that was a city in the Silla Kingdom, so there was a very sacred tree that grew in the Silla Kingdom. This might be a representation of that. And in fact, the little jade cashews might represent ripe fruits hanging from the tree that maybe then further represent fertility. But again, there's no way to know completely for sure. One last note on this crown to think about in terms of what it can tell us about larger connections between different regions. First of all, there's a lot. This crown looks pretty similar to crowns that were also found in Afghanistan. The same kind of cut work, cut up gold sheet with gold wire. So it suggests that there was some interaction between the people in the Korean peninsula at this time and the nomads of Central Asia, that perhaps they were seeing each other's artworks and influencing one another. Also, keep in mind that the Silla Kingdom was part of the Silk Road. So again, there would have been trade that was going along the Silk Road and ideas that would be making their way up to Korea along the Silk Road. Okay, the second Korean work that is in this unit is right here, the portrait of Sukju from 1417 to 1475. So this, as you can see, it's done by the Imperial Bureau of Painting. So this would be a government-sponsored workshop, basically, that would produce paintings of this kind. So what we see here is, and I'm correct on the dimensions this time, didn't mix up my inches and feet. It's 65 inches by 43 inches. We see Sukju in a very conventional pose. So we see his full body. He's seated on this chair with these kind of characteristic scrolled handles here. And his face is slightly turned, right? So you can see one of his ears here. So it suggests that he is a little bit turned towards us, and or in contraindication to his body. And there are just a few. This robe is largely a wash of color with some gold detailing here. We see some contour lines that suggest where the folds and creases in the robe would be. Now, in the Imperial Bureau of Painting, this would have been a collaborative work in that depending on what you were good at, you'd paint that part of the image. So somebody who was good at portraiture might paint the face, and somebody else who was good at color work might paint the robe, right, etc. So when we look at this, also note that the gold here is meant to show Sukju's rank. Now, why was this made? Well, this portrait was made as kind of a commemoration or an award to recognize Sukju as a meritorious subject, to say that he is a good subject and a loyal and important to the king of the Joseon dynasty, which is what period we'd be in right now, the Joseon dynasty. So Sukju was a scholar and he was a politician, but what's also really interesting about him is he basically writes the first Korean art history. He writes about the history of Korean art, and from that history, which still exists, we learned about connections between the Joseon dynasty and China, particularly in terms of art and the way that Chinese art influenced Korean art. Now, in terms of what would this be used for? This would have been an incredibly prized possession of Sukju's family. Remember that from China, in terms of Chinese influence, not just on art, but other things that came to Korea from China, we would also have an influence of Confucianism. And that means that people would practice ancestor worship. So this hanging scroll would be hung in the family altar for ancestor worship. So that's pretty much it about our two pieces of Korean art. That's that.